get busy one time. Pump it up.
Let me see you jump to the right, jump to the right. Let me see you jump to the left. Oh yeah, right, your dynamite, your left, right, your left.
Everybody get busy one time. Pump it up.
It's truly my pleasure to have the opportunity to address you as you embark on your careers in corrections. I must say that in some ways I envy you. I envy you. Your careers have begun at a time when the field of corrections is beginning to rely extensively on science. So what do I mean by that, you may ask? I mean that correction departments all over our country and around the world are collecting and sharing data and information electronically that they have collected throughout the years. This illustrates that it's possible to do empirical studies reviewing any subject in our industry using data and criteria found at our very fingertips. As recently as 20 years ago, the science of crime, punishment, and treatment were relatively undeveloped when it came to determining the factors that will lead to recidivism, offenders reoffending, or repeat offenses. However, over the past 2 decades, researchers in these fields have made major strides in identifying what factors can predict recidivism or offenders repeating their crimes. State legislators and general assemblies and agencies must make decisions about the interventions and the programs that they will provide the offenders on their state supervision that may change their behaviors for the better. In other words, it's not your grandfather's Department of Corrections. But how do we know that the interventions we offer prisoners will help them to avoid a life of crime once they are released? What assurances do we have that treatment will work well enough to keep offenders from reoffending and to keep the public safe, which is our #1 responsibility? Performance measures are becoming the norm rather than the exception. Also, correctional leaders and criminologists are sharing their findings online and in publication, and so those things are widely available. As a result of all this technology and sharing of information, today we have the opportunity to do a much better job in creating public safety with all the resources that we have. Public safety is at the very core of our mission, but we must be smart about how we go about first understanding what public safety means and then how to achieve it. How do we create public safety beside locking up individuals? That's a question that we need to ponder. How do we create public safety beside incapacitation or incarceration? Is the incarceration of inmates creating public safety, or does it just maintain public safety temporarily? I firmly believe that we help to maintain public safety by upholding the sentencing of offenders and keeping them incarcerated for the length of their sentence. But to create public safety actually means adding value to society as a whole. It's not just incapacitation. It's adding value to society as a whole. We incarcerate individuals who have failed in society, and we strive to equip them with the tools to overcome their individual frailties and faults. Value is added when we are successful in our mission, and we are all role players. But it's when we play our individual roles well that we are able to be successful. Some will argue that corrections is the last stop along the criminal justice continuum. But I will argue that in some instances, we are the first line of defense. And here is why I so opine. One of the significant factors in determining whether an individual will go to prison or not is if he or she had been to prison before. Think of that. That's one of the determining factors in deciding if someone will go to prison. It's whether or not he or she had been there before. That's because if an individual has been to prison before, he or she may reoffend because of a variety of reasons. So, one of the best ways that we can create public safety is to target the offenders for treatment to prevent reoffending. So think of that. So you're saying to yourself, well, that's not really my job to provide treatment. But your job as role players, your job as individuals who emulate or who show good behaviors for offenders is modeling for them the right things to do, in addition to just engaging with them as human beings, because of the proven link between certain characteristics and conditions and repeat criminal behavior. Interventions designed for incarcerated populations are most likely to succeed if they target the following factors for change. So again, based on a consistent body of research, this is what researchers have found works in terms of creating public safety when we deal with inmates. They have identified that the factors in order of importance are: 1, we must focus on anti-social values. That's the first thing that causes people to commit crimes. Anti-social values. We must target those, we must treat those using the science. Secondly, antisocial peers, your acquaintances, the folks with whom you engage. They cause you and cause their friends to end up in prison. Poor self-control, self-management, and problem-solving skills are next. Those are the third set of factors that causes people to come to prison. That's why you'll see that in the Virginia DOC, we have cognitive programs and other structured programs to address those things, because that's what the science tells us works. Fourth, families that are dysfunctional. Dysfunctional families promote crime. And that's why we believe that it's important to treat the offender and families alike. But dysfunctional families, the research shows us, are the fourth thing in the hierarchy that leads to criminal behavior. And fifth, past criminality leads to criminal behaviors. So we create public safety by targeting our interventions to correct those key predictors. Does that make sense to you? And so it stands to reason why the Virginia DOC, for the last 2 consecutive years, have led the nation with the lowest rate of recidivism of 22.4%, compared to the states on the higher end of the spectrum of 62.4%. States that focus on getting tough on crime, states that focus on incapacitation, states that focus on incarceration. Keep those things in mind as you go through your career. We are all role players. We have people who are specialists in providing cognitive restructuring programs. We have people who are specialists in mental health. We have people who are specialists in food service. We have people in all of the specialties that the science tells us we need to have in an effort to correct behavior. We have a custody force that specializes in interdiction, that specializes in control, but plays a very important role beyond interdiction and control in that custody force models humane behavior for the offenders and for everyone else around. That custody force models behaviors that offenders would want to emulate. That if they were to emulate those behaviors, they will then choose other than a life of crime. So as Mr. Hinkle was saying, you play a major role in the success of this agency. Much is on your shoulders. When all of the other specialists go home at the end of the day, you are left with the offenders, to engage with them, to treat them humanely, to help them understand that there are other ways of contributing to society than the behaviors that they chose to engage in. As was said by Mr. Hinkle as well, this discipline is not for everyone. Corrections is not for everyone. It's very challenging. But I argue that corrections is a noble endeavor. It is a noble endeavor. Because as we struggle and labor to protect society, at the same time, we are rebuilding individual lives. Individual lives that if we are successful in our efforts to rebuild, we'll go out and be better citizens, not commit new crimes, and engage in what we call the creation of lasting public safety, as opposed to temporary public safety that comes with incarceration and incapacitation. So much is on your shoulders. You have a major job. You have a big job. This July, I began my 45th year in corrections, having worked in 4 states. Most of you weren't born when I started. And I can tell you, corrections has changed drastically. An academy like this was non-existent back then. Yes, there was training, but not what you are getting today. The science that I spoke about was in its infancy of what works and doesn't work in corrections. Today we know what works and what doesn't work. So I encourage you to ask questions. I want to make it clear to you that you're not out there on a limb by yourself. And when in doubt, I prefer that you stop, hit the pause button, and ask someone with more experience, or even a colleague, a question before you act and make a mistake. Because when we err, it could be deadly. I want to thank you for your decision, your choice to become servants of the people of the Commonwealth of Virginia. This agency has been adding value for decades to the state, and with you, our newest employees, we expect to continue in that tradition. Thank you very much, and Godspeed to you.
Dylan
Best
Mitchell.
wishes.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Allah
Best
Uday.
wishes to you.
Thank you, sir.
Best to
Michael
you.
Pickrell.
Thank you.
Front row.
Best wishes to you.
See.
Thank you.
Michael Smith. And our final honor graduate, Christopher Sprouse.
Best to you. Congratulations.
Shelton.